I sat in the cabin. I went through the program, which was all workshops the next day. I was like, I came all this way and I spent all this money, and I could either sit in my cabin all weekend where it's safe and I feel okay, or I can participate. And I was like, damn it, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to cry. So I went through and circled the workshops I wanted to go to, and I went to them. And by Saturday, midday, I met all these people that loved me for who I was, and they told my story. They were like me, and I had never, ever felt that before.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Little Ginge is in the house. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas, for episode number 380. That was the voice of Mr. Gary B. that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you're going to hear so much more from Gary in just a moment. But first things first, this here episode 380, is brought to you by, or it's made possible by, I guess that's basically the same thing. I don't know why I had to pause and say that. But anyway, this episode is made possible by Dave, Terry, Audrey, Mary Lynn, and Laura. And so you ask yourself, what exactly did Dave, Terry, Audrey, Mary Lynn, and Laura do? Well, they visited our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little yellow donation tab and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Dave, Terry, Audrey, Mary Lynn, and Laura. This episode is coming right out to youans. As always, we are going to let the other folks listen in, but we appreciate your generosity. So we here at Sober Speak, if you are joining us for the first time, are here to hopefully provide you a little, ray of sunshine in your life, a little a virtual hug over the internet, and hopefully get you back on the beam, if you will, or if you're on the beam already, to keep you on the beam. But we're really glad that you have joined us. All right, so we're going to get right into Mr. Gary B today. Really, really enjoyed spending time with Gary. He is from Charlotte, North Carolina. He has been sober since November of 2017, and we are calling this episode, They Were Like Me. Gary and I met through another podcast called Sober Not Mature. If you want to check those guys out over there, we both appeared as guests on that program, podcast, whatever you want to call it. We spend a lot of time, or a bit of time, talking about Gary's formative years and his journey from what he calls a victim to a survivor. We also discussed the influence that the book Drop the Rock had on Gary, how AA is like medicine for him. And we talk about the sober retreats that were instrumental in Gary's recovery and much more. By the way, Gary sent me the links to the retreats he is talking about on this episode. So I will put those links in the episode notes. And if you can't figure out how to access those links, I'm sorry. I'm struggling with my pronunciation skills today. Anyway, if you can't figure out how to access those links in the show notes, just send me an email, John, John, at soberspeak.com, and I will get you in touch with Gary, or make sure you get the links, whatever you're looking for. By the way, the name of the retreats are Winter Awakening, Quest, Highlands, and Carol. Caro Lambda is what it is. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I butchered that, but nonetheless. All right, everybody. We will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode, but please enjoy Gary. I know you will. Okay, everybody. So today we are sitting here with Mr. Gary B. And Gary, I'm going to go ahead and on the front end of this, just have you introduce yourself. Give your sobriety date if you wish, and then tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
Yeah, my name is Gary B. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 19th, 2017. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. Have you always lived in Charlotte?
I have not. I've lived here about 24 years now. So I grew up in upstate New York, south of Rochester, a little town called Hornell with an H that most people don't know about. But I did my time in the cold, and now I live down in the warm.
How did you get from New York to North Carolina?
Actually, my partner got transferred down here. So he had a job up there, and then they asked if he wanted to move down to Charlotte, and we're like, God, let's go.
So are you happy with the decision?
Yes. Good. Yeah, we've been here quite a while, and it's home to me. It's a nice place to live. Oddly, growing up, I never really liked New York, and I would always ask my parents, when are we going to move? And nothing wrong with upstate New York. It's beautiful, but I never really, as a kid, I didn't want to live there. And I went to college in Potsdam, and I don't know if you know where that is, but it's about an hour and a half south of Montreal, Canada.
Yeah.
And the average temperature during the school year is -10. So I've done my time in the cold and the snow, and I appreciate that Charlotte has all 4 seasons without snow. Although we get ice. Ice can be worse, but I like it hot.
So I do want to tell people that we got on to record here, and we can see each other, as you know, and I only record the audio just because traditions and anonymity and all that sort of stuff, and then I release it out. But the first thing you said was, "Oh wow, you do not look like who I thought you were going to be." I never know whether that's a compliment. There's a friend of mine, Bill from California. He always says when he meets people in person at conferences, he says, "Am I much better looking than you thought I was going to be?" And so I'll just assume that was the case. All right.
I work in unified communications, and there's a lot of times you hear someone and you get an idea what they look like in your head, and then you meet them in person and you're like, nope, not what I had in my head.
It happens all the time, doesn't it?
Shows that the story in our head is not usually correct.
That's right. So
I have learned.
All right, so you and I met each other through. We'll give them a little shout out here. There's a podcast called a Sober Not Mature podcast, and they those guys are crazy. I was fortunate enough to be interviewed on their podcast, and you've been on their podcast as well.
Yeah, I've been on twice.
How many times have you been on there?
2 times.
Gotcha.
They had me on to tell my story, and then they had me on about a year later to do a follow up.
Yeah.
And they're great. I listen to them every week.
Yeah.
They have really, really good recovery.
Yeah.
And a good sense of humor.
Yeah, they definitely have a good sense of humor.
And they are great friends too. So it's really neat to listen to them.
Yeah. How did you meet them?
Talk to each other. I tripped over their podcast, looking for sober podcasts, and I liked what I heard. And I went back all the way to the beginning. They had only been, I think, doing it for about 3 months at that time. So I went back and downloaded all the previous stuff to get caught up, and really appreciated their story. And it's kind of the meeting before the meeting. I usually listen to it because they release on Saturdays. So there's a Sunday men's meeting I go to, and I listen to it in the car on the way there and the way home. So it's my meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just keep up with them weekly too, and try and probably every other month I send them a little email just saying, hey, I appreciate what they do.
Nice. And you've sent me some emails too. And I think you said you'd listened to several shows. There was a couple of people in particular that impacted you. Do you remember what exactly that was or how that came about?
Well, you were on Sober Not Mature, so then I started listening to your podcast, which now I also listen to. And I've gone back. You have a lot more than they do, though. But I download probably 5 or 6 a week and listen to at least 2 or 3 of them. You have fantastic speakers on. Beth B really spoke to me, and Tracy J really spoke to me. I was just listening to Step 6 with, I don't remember the person. It was from 2022. I'm sorry, I'm not.
Was it like Chris S. or something like that?
Probably.
Okay.
I can't find it real quick.
Okay.
I don't want to waste the time.
Was it a male or a female?
It was a male,
okay.
And he was doing Step 6. It sounds like you guys know each other because you had little jokes going back and forth, so that was cool. But the part with Beth that I really related to was kind of moving from that victim to survivor, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So we can jump into that if you want, or we can.
Yeah, no, sure. Let's go that way. So moving from victim to survivor. So what does that bring to mind for you when you think about that?
So actually what's interesting is this good timing, because the beginning of October 7 years ago is when I started to come into the program. My sobriety date's November, but I actually went to my first meeting. I think it was the first or second week of October. And part of the thing that I drank at was emotional and physical abuse from 11 to 18 is when I think I finally moved out. And I don't necessarily need to get into the specifics of how that happened, but it was with my real father and my stepmother. And my stepmother dished out most of what was there, and then my real father allowed that to happen. And so the last couple of years that I drank, I did all that resentment tape. Like, I didn't want to drink. I would think about all the stuff that happened to me. I would sit and think over and over and over, this is what she did to me. And I would drink at that because the negative thought loops and the things in my head, I could not make stop. Alcohol made that stop. At least temporarily, till I got up the next day and was full of remorse and was on that merry-go-round over and over. So I knew when I came into recovery that I would need to A, be sober, and B, go to some sort of therapy, because I knew I was going to have to face those demons. And for a long time after I moved out, it didn't really bother me, but it gradually started to show up in odd ways. Those of us that are sick and suffering know that sometimes things come out sideways when they're feelings that have been repressed. But the victim to the survivor thing is, when I came into the rooms, I was a victim. You would drink if you went through what I went through too. And I played that card a lot, and I sat in that a lot. And my sobriety and doing the steps, oh God, what have I done them 4 or 5 times now? I'm getting ready to start my sponsor just invited me to a men's step study that we're going to do again, which I really like to do. side topic. There's about 12 guys that get together and do the steps every year and a half. And that was a really cool experience and a neat way to do the steps. But I really used 6 and 7 move me from victim to survivor about year 4. So the first 4 years of recovery, I was in AA, working the steps, working with a sponsor, and in parallel, I was doing therapy, pretty intensive therapy. And then at that point, I told my therapist, like, I've done enough work. I just want to go live. And I got to a point where I could kind of deal with life in general. A friend of mine was cleaning out, going through his sobriety books, and he asked me, he goes, I got all these sobriety books. Would you like some of them? I'm giving them to people. I don't want to get rid of them. And one of those was Drop the Rock. And so I started reading it, and I related to what was in there. Now, obviously, the 6 and 7 I had done for the steps at that point, I had done the steps twice. We're just saying the prayer and reflecting on your character defects, and we kind of went through those. But I never really did a deep dive into those until I read this book. And I really went through and I read it one time, then I read it again. And when I reread it, and this is a common theme in my sobriety, I'll tell you about dry in a little bit. I wrote down anything that brought up feelings. I kind of went through and wrote down my character defects, and a lot of, I hate calling them character defects because they're basically character aspects that have been taken to an extreme. And, you know, I feel like I just need to dial them in, and various people can do them how they want. But I literally wrote down all these things that I do. And a lot of them I learned the behaviors because when I lived in that household that was very, very sick, that's what kept me safe. Those were the things that kept me from punishment. Those were the things that kept me from, staying out of people's way. And up until that point of actually reflecting on them and being open and willing to look at them, those were the things I hated about myself. Like they're bad. And they would get in the way. Like I still struggle with my relationships with other people because I have a tough time opening up. I have a hard time being vulnerable. And so a couple examples of the things that I wrote down were like being super over observant. So if you stuck me in a room and for 5 or 10 minutes and someone else was in the same room and we walked away, I could probably describe to you everything in that room, where the exits are, who's there, what they feel like, are they happy, are they not happy, whatever I observe. And I've always done that. Part of the things that she did was, depending on who you were with and who you're around, was how you had to act. So like if we were at my grandparents' house, we acted one way. If we were at home, we acted a different way. If these people showed up, we'd act like the rules would change depending on who was there. For the most part, I just tried to make everyone happy and blend into the woodwork. And I can give you some specific examples if you want, but being over observant is one of those things that I think people can relate to. And so go ahead.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a half brother and a half sister. And so my real mom, my real mother, and my stepfather, who I call my dad, I originally lived with them until I was 10. And then I decided to go move in with my father. Mm. And my stepfather had a little bit of anger management issues when he was younger. He had quite an anger. But he wasn't really abusive. He would just get overly angry and be a little bit more rough than I think you should be. He has since calmed down a lot more from that. But I didn't realize moving in with my father wasn't really going to make that better. It made it worse. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of my childhood trying to get my father to love me, which he would not. And he always treated me like I was a mistake. And I now know that I don't need his validation. Outside validation is something I saw a lot. Another character defect. that I work on and I ask to be let go of. And
And the reason
then,
I asked about your brothers or your half brothers and half sisters is because I'm always curious. Oh gosh, I've seen people that grow up in the same household, and I'm wondering if you've had conversations with them and if they line up with how you perceive things, and was it different at all? And I mean, have you had any conversations with them?
um, I have my sister knows bits and pieces of what happened. For the most part, they didn't know.
Right, they're in a different
And
house.
my mom didn't know, and I don't talk a lot about it with my mom because she gets really upset and she feels like she failed me and that she could have known and stopped it. And I was like, you can't change what happened, and you couldn't have done anything at that point. um I I've more talked with people on the Burdell side. Oops, shouldn't say my name, but uh, that's perfectly fine to leave that in there, by the way. I've talked with my aunts and my uncles um, that were there and were part of that, and also knew my stepmother. And what's interesting is that she treated them the same way, and I never knew that because I didn't see it. And so I'm the oldest grandchild of many, um, and she would treat those kids the same way. Um, and so that was really validating. But I actually didn't talk to them that much about it. Um, there was a couple of years ago when I actually talked to my aunt, and we talked about those kind of things and how strange she was. And they actually said that they would watch me change. So if I was hanging out with my grandparents and my stepmother wasn't there, when she would show up, they're like, you would just like change and get quiet and turn, demure, and you could watch you change. And that's what I learned to do in that environment.
So has the work, what kind of tangible results have you seen from doing that work? How does it show up in your life? And, how does it kind of dovetail into your sobriety? Talk some about that.
Sure. So the next thing that I did after I wrote out all those things is I went through and picked out the good. So because I went through that and I'm very observant, I'm also really good at my job. I pay attention to detail more so than a lot of people. I just turned it down a little bit. Like I don't need to be anxious about it and let it use so much space. So I went when I did my work with 6 and 7. My part of letting go is letting go of the things I no longer need. And when I accepted that what I went through made me who I am, that's when I switched from victim to survivor. It just changed my mindset. Like, if I hadn't have gone through all those things, then I wouldn't be Gary. And a lot of my sobriety journey has been, who is Gary? Because I didn't know when I got sober, because I drank all the time. Like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. That was never a choice. I always did what everyone else wanted to do because I wanted to just stay in the background and not cause any waves. Like, oh, I can make a decision. I have a voice. And that's part of what I'm working on now is fellowship in my program has been very difficult for me. When I came in the first year, it was really, really hard to even just talk to people. And I didn't want to talk to people because I didn't trust anybody. I wasn't allowed to trust. I wasn't allowed to feel, and I wasn't allowed to talk. Children are to be seen and not heard. You will speak in the least amount possible and not create a conversation. And I grew up without being allowed to have friends. I literally sat in the barn most of the time by myself. I wasn't allowed in the house. They didn't trust me. So if they weren't home, the house was locked and I was out on the farm with the animals, basically. And that really affects that. For 5 years, that's what I did. And as an adult, I did not do well with conversations unless I had alcohol. And so in sobriety, I'm learning how to do that sober. The step work and like acceptance has been really, really big for me.
a friend of mine, he was actually said this in a meeting the other day. David G. I don't know if you've ever actually heard him on the podcast or not, but he's got a lot of episodes on here. And I heard him say in a meeting the other day, he said that when we come into AA or any sort of 12-step program and we have this, mental illness, for lack of a better word, like me, right? I'm
Mhm.
sure I came in there with some form of some form of mental illness, and I still struggle with things, right? And he said, it's not like you just come in and that mental illness just disappears and all of a
No.
sudden you are just fine and dandy.
I
You just,
wish.
you deal with it in a different way, and hopefully you're not out, causing all kinds of havoc and, vandalizing the neighborhoods and stuff like that. But we still have to deal with all that stuff. And, like when you say becoming from a victim to a survivor, it takes a while to get there, and there's
It certainly
no
does.
easy road. You have to go through it. You can't go around it. It definitely takes a while to get through that stuff.
And my first sponsor with my first fourth step started that process because the very first person I had on there was my stepmother. And when I told him what had happened, he stopped me halfway through and he said, I just want you to realize that's not your fault.
Right.
Your part in that was that you were there. And I'd heard that before, but I never really heard that. And at that moment, that's when I started to heal from what I had been through.
Really? So that was the moment
Yeah.
when you heard that it was not your fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oh, that's powerful right there. And
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
sure there's a lot of people listening, Gary, that have been through some traumatic things in their life. And I think it's good for them to hear, like you just said, it's not your fault. But, and I know there's a but to it because you started with the work, right? But once you realize that, then it kind of comes on your shoulders, right? To some
Mm-hmm.
degree, not like it's your fault or anything, but at that point, it's time for you to what would you say? Like if somebody's listening and when you heard it's not your fault, at that point, you were able to go from that. I guess that's when you went from victim to survivor, and you were able to say, what was the internal dialogue at that point?
Well, I didn't get to the survivor for another 3 years, but it definitely opened the door to being willing to really look and do the work. So it really turned a corner for me at that point. And I just felt a big weight come off of me because I had always been told that it was my fault. Part of what she would do a lot of times was, because you did this, you're causing these things. And that was why I never thought I could leave. I thought there was something wrong with me because everything I did was wrong. Because even if you did it right, the rules would change and it was wrong. Which kind of made me a perfectionist to an extent too. It was really twisted. But after that happened, you spend an hour by yourself, usually, which is what I did. My therapist had asked me to write a letter to them as if they were in the room, but they couldn't say anything. And that's when I wrote that letter. I wrote out probably 5 pages of all the things that I wanted to say to my father and my stepmother, who, by the way, my stepmother passed away earlier this year,
Oh,
which gave
wow.
me some closure. And my father's still alive. I've not spoken to either of them since I was 18. The last thing my father ever said to me was, don't die by the time you're 30, because I came out to him and he disowned me. And that was kind of the end of that. And even so much like when my aunt, who I maintain a relationship with, if she talked about me, my father would say, what, son? Like he totally I don't exist. Which is fine. That's on him. And as much as I go to AA, I also go to Al-Anon. So there's some Al-Anon in here too, and that's on him. That's not on me. And so Al-Anon has helped me a lot with both of those things.
What was in that letter? And was it more vitriol, getting it out? Was it, and what was in there, just in general?
A lot of anger,
Mhm.
And a lot of it was a lot of I need to tell you how you affected me. Because of what you did, this is how it affects my life. And this is it holds me back. Um, and not that it made me drink because I'm an alcoholic anyway. There never was one ever. And that was long before I was in that situation, but it didn't help. Um, and there's a lot of things that I had to struggle with as an adult because of it, that I'm working to let go of and become a better person. And the steps in general, I think everyone can use the steps. I wish everyone did. It'd be a wonderful world if we did that. But I think everyone can use 2 through 12, and everyone's powerless over something, so that way you can use one. But the steps in general, to me, and especially the big book, is just how to be a good person. Every day I try and be the best person that I can be, and going through the steps several times has allowed me to accept these things that happened, work through them with somebody else that I trust. And, you discover, what is it? Uncover, discover, and discard.
Mhm.
And then I don't have to have these things in my life anymore. I have the choice to do something else. And when I was drinking, I didn't have that choice. All I could do was drink. I was a slave to the alcohol. Well, now I have choices. I can choose to be happy. I can choose to do things, and I can choose who's around me. I kind of have a really strange idea of family as well, because growing up with my parents both divorced and remarried very early, I had I had 2 sets of parents and 4 sets of grandparents, which I thought was normal, and most people were like, "What?" And then all kinds of extended family. And a lot of them, she told me that you're not supposed to love that kind of family. Those people are awful. She tried to separate us from a lot of the family, and so especially in college, I had friends that I considered part of my family. I mean, I love my sister and my brother. They're my half sister and half brother, but as far as I'm concerned, they're my sister and my brother. And my grandparents and all the aunts and uncles, I'm not blood relation to them. They loved me better than some of my blood relation. So, I do believe you can pick and choose your family, and AA is like a family to me. Those people, I would do anything for the people in my circle. Same thing that Beth said, like the people in my inner circle that I really trust. And I've got a group of those, and they're growing slowly. I would do anything for. I had a guy last night that called me out of the blue. He got my number from someone else and said, "Can you take me to a meeting?" I said, "Sure." I didn't even hesitate. And I didn't even, at the time, it took me a little bit to think about who is that person. But it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is someone reached out. If you're willing to look for a number and reach out for help, I'm here. I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And I say that out loud every single meeting I go to, because I believe it, because someone did that for me. But, yeah, that was a diatribe that we didn't need to go on, but that's cool.
No, I like that a lot. So, what brought you to your first meeting? Do you remember that?
Yes, very much so. And it's one of my 2 home groups. The very last thing that happened, I could tell you the whole story, but the very last thing that happened was my sister. My partner went to New York to visit some family. I stocked up on alcohol, and it was Friday, and then it was Sunday. Typical blackout. And I think to this day, my sister will not tell me what I called her and said, but I do believe that I called her and said I was going to kill myself, and or that I wanted this to be over or something. When I called her on Monday, because I went back through my phone. There's nothing worse than that. I do not miss that at all. You come to and you go back through your phone like, I called all these people. So I called her, and she didn't say hello. She said, "You need help." And my sister and I are very close. Growing up, I used to feed her soggy Cheerios, and I helped take care of her because I think she's 7 years younger than me. And
Did
I was
you
like,
say you
"Yes,
fed her
I do."
soggy Cheerios?
Yeah, when she was a kid, she used to sit in the high chair, and I would feed her soggy Cheerios. They were in milk so that she could chew them,
Oh, I got
and
it.
my mom encouraged that behavior. So I Jamie and I are very close. I love her dearly, um, and we always have been. So just her saying that, I was like, yes, I do need help. And so I called my doctor and I said, I need to find a therapist that specializes in alcoholism. And he referred me to someone at a place here called Anuvia, which is a IOP treatment center, and they don't let you just make an appointment with a therapist. So, long story short, they did an intake, and in the intake process, they said I had to go to meetings, and I said, "Do you have gay AA?" And she was like, "Yeah, we do." And she Googled it, and it was a Tuesday, and they said, "We have acceptance group. It's at 8 o'clock." And that was my very first meeting. And I continue to go to that meeting. I've gone to that meeting for 7 years. Um, and I tell people, 6 years ago, I sat at this seat, this very place is where I came in.
So,
And go ahead.
okay, so you went to gay AA
Mhm.
for your first meeting. Were you, I guess, uncomfortable or a little? Did you have some trepidation about going to just a general mixed meeting or something like that, or a men's meeting or anything like that?
I guess at first, I had just asked that. A lot of the first 6 months were really, really, really fuzzy. The first 6 months of sobriety were just doing the deal. I didn't necessarily do 90 and 90. I was going to 5 or 6 meetings a week, so that was pretty close. Um, by the way, I don't recommend that, and I tell my sponsees to go to 90 and 90. I wish I had done it, but at the time, I do believe that my higher power hands us things as we're ready, and I don't think I was quite ready to dive in fully. And it took me a lot longer to learn the program, and I'm still learning. But I went to all kinds of meetings. I just I had asked her for that initially because I wanted to see if that was a thing. And I do appreciate the LGBT meetings, and the Sunday meeting I go to is specifically a gay men's meeting, but all men are welcome,
Right.
and that's part of what I've learned in the program. Everybody is welcome. Um, and I go to sober retreats too. They're a big part of my story,
Tell me
and the
about
ones
those.
I
Where
have.
do you go?
So there's one called Winter Awakening, and that's coming up in January. These are all LGBT. There's one in May called the Highlands Retreat that I went to this year. And there's one in October, which would have been next weekend, unfortunately. It's Columbus Day weekend every year, which got canceled due to the hurricane. And I completely understand why, but that's at a campground down in Aiken, South Carolina, called Carol Lambda, and it's great. That one I've been going to for 3 years. Um, I'll tell you the Winter Awakening story here real quick. So 3 months into my sobriety, I was at a meeting, and back then people just used to appear in front of me because I'm all still cloudy and trying to. I shook. I literally drank 24/7 for about 3 years before I came in, and if I didn't have alcohol within 2 hours, I would just shake horribly. And I shook for like 3 or 4 months. Like it was rough. I should have probably went to detox. I'm lucky that I'm alive, but that being said, people who would just appear at a meeting. So I was trying to leave one night from acceptance, and this guy appeared, who I'm still friends with, and in between these two cars, and said, "You need to go to Winter Awakening." And I was like, "What the hell is that?" And he's like, "It's a sober retreat," and it took me a while, but I got there and I registered. And I went up there and walked in, and there was this big lodge, and there was like 70 people there, and they were laughing and having a great time, and it was loud. And I was like, what the hell did I get myself into? I don't know where I'm at. I'm on top of this mountain. And I retreated to my cabin. And they say in this program that, we come to a decision and we need to be honest. It's how honest, open, and willing. And I sat in the cabin and went through the program, which was all workshops the next day. And I was like, I came all this way and I spent all this money, and I could either sit in my cabin all weekend where it's safe and I feel okay, or I can participate. And I was like, damn it, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to cry. So I went through and circled the workshops I wanted to go to, and I went to them. And by Saturday, midday, I met all these people that loved me for who I was, and they told my story. And they said they they were like me. And I had never ever felt that before. Like I'd been on a gay cruise before and felt like kind of a part of because everyone there was gay, but I had never really truly felt like a part of. And these people, a lot of people that go to the retreats, they just want sobriety on like a kind of a different level. Not that regular people don't, so to speak, or people don't go, but it's a very intense way to like really work on your recovery. And the people that attend these want that. And so, you know, I cracked wide open. Like I let all my walls down. I had felt completely safe, and I was with my people. And then the next day, I opened my big mouth and made a suggestion, and I've been on the committee ever since. So this will be my sixth year on the committee, and it'll be my seventh Winter Awakening. And so I help with technology and registration and stuff. It's a really cool way to do service. But like I tell people, if one person shows up and has the same experience that I had, because that really turned the corner for me in my sobriety. Like it showed me that you can be open and you can share and you can hear your story and you can relate and you can be supported and loved. And that's what AA is for me. And I call it medicine. It's like, that's why I continue to go to meetings. You know, if I was a diabetic, I would have to take insulin. And if I don't take my insulin, then, you know, my diabetes will bother me. Well, I'm an alcoholic. And if I don't go to meetings and get my medicine, I get crazy. I get off the beam. Like it literally, like the level just, you know, and I know when that happens. Sometimes with work, I can't always make my regular meetings. But I really enjoy it. Like I love to go. Now I'm still struggle with sharing, and I still struggle with being vulnerable, and I have a tough time with the fellowship afterwards. It's very uncomfortable. And for a long time, I did not do those things. That's not to say I wouldn't do fellowship. I just would do it kind of on my terms. I work a lot better in a smaller group. So I love to have people over for dinner. I do sponsor 3 people. I try and get them together when I can. And so, you know, I can go and do that, but like 30 of us going to dinner is not comfortable for me, but I have been trying to go more. Because they now know, because I've shared about that in meetings, and people come up and tell me, like, are you going to go to dinner? Like, you really should go. Like, all right, I'll go. So I'm slowly like working on that. But, you know, sobriety has been that for me. It's always something to work on. And part of the retreats that I go to, a lot of times I only see those people once a year. And so what they do for me is show me what I've done, where I'm at, and what I need to do. And it's a cool way to get back. So
how did you find that? Like, I'm sure there's going to be some people listening to this, and this is why I'm asking the question. How did you find those retreats in the front end? Was it all word of mouth? Is there some website? How did it all work out?
we do have a website, but most of the times it's we announce them at meetings. Yeah. So all over the Southeast, we announce them at LGBT meetings. But anyone can look us up if you Google it. The other 2 I found out because someone else I know went and just said, hey, do you want to go? So Carol Lambda I added in about 3 years ago. And it was nice to go to a retreat where I'm not doing the work, even though I did a workshop there, but I'm not on the committee. So I can go enjoy the retreat. And then the Highlands I went to because a friend of mine that I met at Winter Awakening wanted to go there. And he said, I want someone there that I know because I'm going to go there. And he drove all the way up from Alabama to do that. And so I was like, I'll go. And then I met some more people there too that I've stayed in touch with, even though they're not local, who I will also see. And it's just that's a really good. So then that's January, May, and October. And I think that's a really good balance. There's another one called Quest that I haven't been to, and it is in the end of February, and it's right after Winter Awakening. So usually by the end of Winter Awakening, I'm kind of retreated out at that point. Like I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I just need to break for about a month. And oddly enough, after that first year, I went back and did a workshop on boundaries because that's what I worked on that first year. I let all my walls down, and then I came back into real life and I was just lost. Like, how do I put all this back in? And so,
yeah, it sounds to me. So every single retreat you talked about is in North Carolina, right? And this is just one state.
No.
Oh.
So Winter Awakening is actually in Clayton, Georgia.
Okay.
We hold it at a place called Ramat Darom, which is a Jewish retreat center. We use about a third of it. The Highlands, and we used to go here too, is at the Mountain Retreat and Learning Center. That's in Highlands, North Carolina. The Quest is out at Myrtle Beach, which I believe is South Carolina. And Cara Lambda's in Aiken, South Carolina.
Isn't Myrtle Beach both in South Carolina and North Carolina? Am I right about that? It might be.
It's on the coast.
Yeah.
It's the coast of the Carolinas, we'll just say that. But yeah, and a lot of these retreats have been around for a long time. Winter Awakening is either our 17th or 18th year.
Gotcha.
So, and it was just a group of people way back when that decided, because there's roundups all over the place. And there's plenty of regular roundups too. These just happen to be mainly LGBT. And it's not necessarily a focus, and they're allies. We do have some people that come that, are just there for the recovery and also support. And like I said, everyone is welcome. And it's a neat space. It's a neat, safe space to create. And just come together and really truly like dig in and be able to kind of be comfortable with being very vulnerable and do some real work. And that's why I enjoy it. And last year we did seven sets of workshops with 3 workshops each. Did we do 7 or did we do 6? It was a lot. And you had to pick, and people always like, I couldn't go to everything. I'm like, well, you can't.
And for people listening that have never been to a retreat and you say the word workshop, explain to folks what you mean by a workshop and kind of what to expect, just a general overview.
Sure. So these are people that are attending that want to talk specifically either about the steps, something in their recovery, something that they feel strongly about. It can also be like there was one that's artistic. They would make like collages. Sometimes we've done ones that are ladders of things that you want to work on. We also there's a nature walk. There's a yoga class. Last year we did one that was somatic release. So she literally guided you through like how to move your body to like release emotions and stuff. And it's just people being kind of creative about a way to either work a step or work on something. In my boundaries workshop, I talked about how I had to put the boundaries back. And then the other person I had speak talked about how he needed to remove boundaries because he had too many. And then we got into little groups and we talked about boundaries and how you would put them in and how you use them in your life. And at the end, one person from each group kind of shared what the main theme was. Get you to think about that kind of stuff. I did one on 6 and 7 too, where we wrote down all your character defects and the other asset. And I said, what of this can you accept? And what of it do you want to let go? And that those are just, that's what a workshop in general is.
Cool.
Yeah. It could just be meditation too.
So if you think about, you have a lot of folks listening to you, right? And I just kind of want you to put a bow on this and kind of share your experience, strength, and hope in terms of recovery and your journey, what this has meant to you, where you were, where you are now. Just talk a little bit about that, if you will.
Sure. I would say if anyone out there is hurting, you're not alone. One of the things I've discovered is there's lots of people that have been through a lot of crap. I won't swear on your podcast. there's a lot of wounded warriors out there, and you're not alone. You can use this as an asset. It does not necessarily have to be a detriment. And like I said, it's victim to survivor, and now what I'm working on is survivor to thriver. It's not fun work, but it's very rewarding. And if you had met me 10 years ago, I'm a completely different person. Like, I wouldn't have said hello to you. I wouldn't have been outgoing. And I'm still not. I'm still an introvert, but I will jump in and actually do things. And the other thing that I have done is is face a lot of my fears. But the biggest thing is sobriety has given me the room to heal and to grow. And I wouldn't have that without the steps and without AA.
I love it. So before we got on, you had mentioned that you were a little bit nervous about coming on today. Wasn't that bad, huh?
Yeah, no, it's always good once I get rolling.
Yeah.
But in my head, I was really good until I got up this morning and I was like, crap. I'm really glad I'm going to have coffee with my sponsor today, because I'll talk to it with him. And he was very helpful.
I enjoyed having you very much, Gary. I'm glad you were able to come on. And I hope that some of those folks out there in North Carolina that are able to listen to it. It's going to be in other places besides North Carolina, trust me.
Yes.
But I hope they're able to hear you.
People.
And I hope you're able to meet some of these folks at these various retreats that you're going to this year, and this kind of prompted something within them. And I appreciate you coming on. I
do want to add one more thing.
Go for it.
I just want to say I'm very, very grateful for you, and I'm very grateful for what you do. And I'm glad that you bring the message to people that can't normally go and find it. And I use podcasts a lot when I can't get to a meeting. If there's some reason I can't get to a meeting, I can put on a podcast and I still have the message. So I'm very, very grateful for what you do.
Oh, God bless you. Yeah. And
Thank you for having me on.
And we are lucky to be, I live in the Dallas area. You live, Charlotte area, there's all kinds of meetings, but there's a lot of people out there that don't have, a meetings within a stone's throw every time they want to go that way. And so, but they don't come to listen to me, Gary. They come to listen to guys like you. They want to hear the experience, strength, and hope from somebody like you that has to share it. So I couldn't do this without you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I am going to read from page 164 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous to close us out. And it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, like me and Gary B., as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, my friend, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Gary B. Like I said, so much enjoyed spending time with you. And I know the listeners will have enjoyed that as well. As I said on the beginning of this episode, the links to the conferences that we talked about are in the show notes. And if you can't figure out how to access that, just email me, John, JOHN, at soberspeak.com, and I will either pass you on to Gary or just send you the links that you're looking for. I'm good either way. So now on to a little, and remember, folks, we do not want you sharing your toothbrush. We do not want you sharing any of your gossip, but we would absolutely love for you to pause your device, hit that little share button, and get Gary's episode on to another friend or family member. It may be just what they need today, folks. Now, on to listener feedback. John writes in, and this is not me writing to myself. It's another John. In fact, it's a Jon, not John. And John, Jon, says, "Hey, John, It's been a while. It's a little Johnapalooza here, right? Too many, all these Johns. Anyway, he says, "Hey John, it's been a while since I wrote you. I was listening to your episode with Sam S. the other day. Yes, the one and only Sam S. And I realized that it was time. That episode hit me hard. Thank you for having him on. So much of what you guys talked about hit me deep inside. I recently took my 2-year cake. I'm extremely grateful for the life I have today, but I have to be honest, I have been really seeing how much work God still has to do on me." Yes, sir, John, and it doesn't quit, but I get it. I know so many people can relate to you out there. And he says, "I've been seeing how alcoholism can manifest in many different ways: dishonesty, selfishness, obsessive behaviors, etc. Even though some things have been painful or uncomfortable, I am grateful that the program always gives me a place to find the solution. I'm also grateful that I have men in my life I can go to that are honest with me without co-signing to my BS. It really has been a wonderful journey this last couple of years. I had the honor of giving one of my sponsees a 1-year chip a few weeks back. Good for you. Hearing his mother speak brought tears to my eyes. Man, I know the feeling. And then he says, "I know God is working through all of us. I just need to stay honest with myself, God, and the people in my life that I am far from having this all figured out. I am part of a big book study, and last night we finished chapter 3, and the part at the end of the page 42 said that, quote, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems, unquote." John says, "Man, that hit me hard. Gave me so much hope and faith that God will continue to show me how to grow and become a better father and husband. It seems I can easily replace these principles at meetings with men in the program socially, but for some reason at home with the family, I seem to fall short sometimes." And I'm giggling a little bit there because I understand. Welcome to the club, Mr. John D. Welcome to the club. And I know there are so many out there listening to this that can relate, but I'm glad you're talking about it. He says, "It's probably the most important area of my life to practice these principles and the most rewarding when done correctly, but also sometimes the hardest. I hope that makes sense." John, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. He said, "I heard you mention on the last episode that you were thinking about coming to Vancouver for the International this summer. I suggest you do. If you do, I would love the chance to have a conversation with you. My wife, who is non-alcoholic, loves listening to your podcast with me." Oh no, you drag her through the mud with me, John? She says, "You always seem to crack her up." Well, I guess that's a good thing. She said, and then he says, "I'm sure she would love to be sent a picture with you. I'm sure she would love to be sent a. Oh, I'm sure she would love to be sent. I guess take a picture with me if the opportunity were to present itself." And I think you mean at the international convention. And he says, "Thanks for all you do, John D., Fort Nelson, British Columbia, in Canada." Well, thank you, John, and God bless you. And if your wife is listening right now, God bless her as well. Putting up with my nonsense, she deserves a Medal of Honor there. But nonetheless, I may come to Canada. I still need to talk to the lovely Mrs. M about that, and we may come up there. But oh gosh, it's already January. I need to make a decision on that pretty soon, but I haven't decided for sure. But thank you so much. Oh, and thank you so much, John, for the pictures of your 2-year cake and your 2-year chip. It was so good to see that, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy for you. God bless you, my friend. Dave writes in, and Dave says, John, I've really gotten a lot out of your podcast for years now. I'm always amazed at the different places people land to serve the program of AA, like you with this podcast. Keep on keeping on, brother. And then he signs at Dave. Well, Dave, I tell you what, we'll make a deal. You keep on listening, and I'll keep on keeping on putting these things out, all right? Thanks, Dave, for writing in. Sean writes in, and Sean says, and the subject line is On the Road. And I started singing that Willie Nelson song when he's out, on the road again, just can't wait to get on the road again. But that's just me. Sean did none of that. He just said on the road. But anyway, he says, hi, John. My name is Sean. January 26th of 2022 is my sober date. My home group is the Nooner in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but it's been a while since I've been part of that meeting. I'm a traveling electrician, and I find myself in small towns in the middle of nowhere where the meetings are few and far between. This morning, I'm sitting in the VA in Hot Springs, South Dakota, about to go to work on their new electrical system. I listen to your podcast and the Grapevine podcast, and it is a great way to start my day. I just wanted to say hello and thanks for doing the podcast. I really appreciate it. Sean. Well, Sean, that made my day. That's so cool to hear. And I'm so glad that we can fill I don't know if you call it a void or not, but I'm so glad that we can fill part of your day there and be a meeting between meetings. So glad we can. And last but not least, okay, so this is a handwritten letter that I have an electronic copy of from our friend Mike, who monitors the P.O. box in Tempe, Arizona. So if I get some of this incorrectly, or I seem like I'm pausing a little bit, that's what's going on. Anyway, Dylan writes in, and Dylan says, hi, Mike and John, via, hey, Mike, and John via Mike. So he's writing to Mr. Mike, actually. And he says, good evening, or whatever relevant time is appropriate for you. I am incarcerated here in Florida, and by the time you read this, I'll have 3 years clean and sober. As long as I daily maintain my spiritual condition. My sobriety date is 12/25, Christmas 21, and I've been locked up since 05/01 of the year 2020. Getting sober from behind the fence hasn't been easy, but it has been infinitely rewarding, and my life is better than it has been for years. I'm writing for 2 reasons. First, in part 5 of the Joe and Charlie Big Book Come Alive podcast, you, John, mentioned that there are 10 parts to the Big Book Comes Alive, but the last Joe and Charlie pod is part 7, posted on February 9th of 2024. Very good. You're very accurate there, Mr. Dillon. Thank you for keeping up with that. And he says, I don't have access to the wider internet, and your podcast is my only point of reference for access for Big Book Comes Alive, in particular, the Joe and Charlie in general. So if you can, I'd absolutely love it if you, John, could post parts 8 through 10 at some point, because Big Book Comes Alive has been an absolute revelation for me and the other guys here in our AA group. You got it, my friend. I'm going to have that coming up, and I know that I left off there, and I need to get back to it. I'll go back and see where I left. Well, I don't have to go back. You've told me, and I can get that one posted. Just look for it here. Oh, I'm sure I'll get it over the next month or so. And if I don't, Mike, help remind me, or Dylan, didn't remind me. But I'm going to try to get back on track with that so I can get all 10 of them out there. Reason for writing number 2. I wrote to GSO to sign up for the corrections correspondence service about 6 months ago, and I've yet to hear anything back. With all that in mind, if y'all, John and or Mike, know anyone from your respective groups or anyone who's been a guest on the show, any drunk who wants to who would like to correspond with a locked up drunk and share experience, strength, and hope, my address is below. I'm not looking for a sponsor because I already have a great one. Shout out to Dennis F. Dennis with one N. Hello, Dennis F. He says, but I'm looking for someone who wants to connect and talk about the book, the program, the fellowship, our common illness, and our common solution. My sponsor is great. My fellows in our group here in prison are incredible, and I'm trying to expand my horizon and broaden my views by learning, from other bozos on the bus. Thanks so much for all you guys do. I appreciate y'all and wish you the best. Peace, Dylan B. Dylan, I'll talk to Mike, and I'm sure I see your address there and your ID number. You're in Tampa, Florida. We'll see if we can get you somebody to get you in contact. I'm sorry that the GSO hasn't contacted you, but between me and Mike, we'll get it all kind of figured out, and hopefully we get you somebody to communicate there with you in Tampa. All right, everybody. That there is another episode of Sober Speak. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. I do this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week and share another episode with you'uns. In the meantime, I love you guys, and may God bless you and keep you until then. Be well.